Hey. All right. Got a little work done today. A lot more, some red zone stuff. Both our offense and defense needed it. Some 2-point play things. And got a very important practice on Thursday. And then Saturday, we'll have a little scrimmage. It's not going to be a game. We're not splitting the team up. Just going to pretty much have a little bit of individual, maybe a little 7-on-7, and then have a little scrimmage. Debating whether I'm going to have all the quarterbacks live or not. We've had them all live the other day, had most of them live today. I'm not sure what I'm going to do yet Saturday. And also hoping the weather cooperates. I hear it might get rain. I hope we don't, because I'd like to have a nice crowd and let them have there's some neat things, festivities planned around the spring scrimmage, so hopefully the weather will cooperate.
Sir, you said the quarterbacks were live a little bit, so obviously your opportunity to evaluate their running ability. What have you seen about them on the move?
Yeah, I think they all got pretty good athleticism, and I think I guess you don't really know until you go live, and sometimes you really don't know until you go in game, their willingness. They all at least have to be a willing runner. And I think we have that. These guys all are willing, and if it's called for or the way they play us is giving the quarterback run, I feel confident that they can do that. So that's a good thing. A couple guys might be a little faster, maybe a little shiftier than others, but all of them as a group give that ability that we can play with 11.
You mentioned Thursday being important. Is it straight football? What are you doing Thursday
We're doing a lot more. We're going to do a lot more team. We've been half practice has been, individual for scheme kind of related, and the other half has been more competitive and team stuff. Thursday will probably be more competitive stuff. Some a little more one-on-ones, a little bit more team. Because again, I've said a bunch of times, we got a lot of evaluations to do in the next few days.
Saturday, in terms of that, a lot of fun stuff, but is it still stuff you can evaluate? Do you see competitiveness?
A little bit, yeah. We're not going to, probably, we're obviously not going to show stuff scheme-wise that you're going to do, but even player-wise, you're going to I'll be less hesitant to show, there'll be some guys that don't play very much.
From practice 1 to now, where do you see the biggest progress in your team?
I think overall, just the tempo is. I'm talking about not just like offensive pace. I'm just talking the tempo of how we're getting through practice. Going from drill to drill. Some of the things we expect. I mean, that's gotten better, but it should after 12, 13 practices. There's another step we still need to take. If I go back and look at my, first spring practice notes from 8, 9, whatever different spots it was. It probably all was pretty similar, but I still think there's another level of intensity that we will get to.
You mentioned that some 7-on-7, some maybe small scrimmage stuff, but no traditional game, and you're a little hesitant to show like certain schemes and certain players too much. How much of that is changing trends in college football, and how much of it is just like the first spring not necessarily coming together the way you always want?
No, it's more toward the former, the first thing. Is that the former or the latter? What's that? The former. Yeah, I mean, if we didn't have a transfer portal open up, I think more coaches would be willing to play more guys. The scheme part, I'm not worried too much about showing what you do scheme-wise, because people are going to watch your film or our film from the last few years, whatever, and get that part of it. So I don't worry about that part too much. And I'm not overly concerned with the portal thing anyway, because I think our guys like it here, and I think most of them want to stay. So the reality is, though, that we have to have some roster movement, and we're not the only ones in the country got to do that.
Did you see that increase in competition, with it being the last week?
Well, let me watch the film first. I think a little bit. I saw a little bit of that today of a couple guys. But I told the team afterwards, I said, we've only got a couple opportunities. And I've told them, I said, it kind of sucks that, we have to do so much roster movement, management, whatever you want to call it, in April. I mean, it's just, yeah, no, I mean, I am complaining. I guess I am complaining, but it's kind of a new thing in college football, and it's not smart. It's not right. It's not organized correctly. And I think the people in charge see that. You can't have this much roster movement and turnover and changing in April and May in the summertime. It's just ridiculous.
You like these morning practices? Is that something you're going to
No,
continue?
we'll go back. I did morning one time. I think I was in Arizona, and we didn't have an indoor at the time, and you know it could get pretty toasty, and in the afternoon. So we did some morning. I think in one or 2 years we did morning practices, but I didn't like it. So I don't like it now. I mean, we're going to go back starting in the afternoon, or this year, going back to classes in the morning, coaches meet in the morning, practice in the afternoon. We don't play any games at 7 or 8 a.m. At least I don't think so.
This was carryover because of class schedule.
Yeah, it was too late for
Yeah.
me to change it. And I understand why some coaches do it. And then the players, you know, half their classes are online anyway. But I like our guys to get used to the time that we play, which is usually in the afternoon. So that's the main reason we'll be changing. We'll change that starting. Their class stuff in the summer will be mostly in the morning now. Their workouts will be afternoons.
You mentioned coaches are going to look at your scheme and look at you did Jack State no matter what. What are your thoughts on the debate on whether a new coach coming into a conference would have a little bit of an advantage, or maybe the opposing coaches would have a little advantage over you because you're new to the conference? Where do you think that?
Yeah, I don't think there's an advantage, your newness or how many years. I think the only advantage of having been at a place for a couple of years is that you've had a chance to develop your system and your roster and so on. Now the roster part of it maybe is not as there's changeover all the time, but at least your schemes or your terminology, the way you go about everything, the more you're there, the more guys are accustomed to that. So I think the first year is always the hardest. I'm not saying it just because it's my first year. It's just, I'm just saying because your first year is always the hardest because there's so much teaching to do, not only with your players, but everybody on your staff, everybody that's involved in your program, how you do things. That all has to get implemented now, and that's a process. And then once it gets implemented, then next year, you may not always do the exact same thing because you got to make corrections and improve, but you know, if you're doing it the right way, you don't have as many improvements or adjustments to make.
On this fellow, though, attention on pace, tempo, everything is on the offensive side. For the defense, and in learning new stuff, how does them having to go at that same pace help them, or maybe are there times when you back it down?
Yeah, it makes it a lot more difficult because Zach's defensive package is like way big. It's way, and so they do a lot, and when they do a lot, I'm sure they, it's not easy to do a lot when you see stuff going at tempo. So I've always intentionally practiced with different tempos, and we have a defensive tempo, so our defense has time to do their thing, and then we have an offensive tempo, so the offense can go at their speed. And so when we do our team and our 7-on-7s and stuff like that, we work with both tempos, and our players know it because we'll yell it out. This is defensive tempo, this is offensive tempo, this is not going to tell you what tempo. So we mix it up.
You have talked earlier this spring a little bit about how you think like moving towards a more pro-based model in the long run could be good for the sport with the changes. Do you think like the roster movement in the spring you're kind of lamenting, do you think that you tie that in with the pro model, or do you think it's something you have to
100%.
adjust to because we're moving to that
Yeah, I
model?
mean, the difference obviously is in draft. In the NFL, the worst team gets the first pick. In college, it's kind of opposite. The best teams are getting the top picks, but you still, and they pick the players. In college, the teams pick the players in the pro, right? In college, the players are picking the teams, and they're the ones that's choosing where to go. So it's a little different dynamic, but I think the yearly calendar on how it's, like where their free agent period is kind of like where our portal period is. So it's it's organized and structured in a way that you can have your roster by May, and they have their OTAs, and then they have their summer workouts and their preseason camp. And so, like I said, they've done it for a long time, very, very successfully. We're basically a pro model now, so we need to think that. I think we need to think that, and that I think people in charge will probably, hopefully, look at our calendar and make some adjustments.
Part of that pro model is gonna be revenue sharing, which is how much the salary.
Yeah, we're paying players now, right?
Yeah, so for yourself, who's didn't do it this way for a long time, you got a GM to help you, but the nuances of this, is it confusing to you, or do you have it down? Do you feel pretty comfortable with what you're gonna do? in that
Yeah,
term?
just for your information, so you know that our GM is not firing our head coach.
True.
I let him know that.
I didn't know you could do that, yeah.
No, you have to have, you know, I think you need to involve, like, maybe a little bit different. Some in the NFL, I think there's some NFL staffs where coaches are heavily involved in personnel decisions, and some where they're not as involved. I want our staff, I mean, obviously, because we're still recruiting on top of paying them. Our staff, everybody in our staff is involved in our roster decisions and roster management, and in particular, our coordinators and position coaches. I want our position coach, if you're the running back coach, you're going to have a huge say on what your running back room is going to look like. I am, and other people on our staff. The GM is going to help organize it, and he'll have his opinion. His opinion is valuable, but he the difference is our GM is not picking our running backs, for instance. He's going to help, but ours. So it's because we still recruit. You have to. I think you got to get involved. It's a different dynamic, but it's also. I want to Chuck. I don't mind talking to agents once in a while, but I'd rather not. I'll let Chuck handle that. You know what I'm saying? Hey, what did his agent say? You know, instead of me calling up the agent and saying, hey, what do you think? You know, I did that the first 3 weeks I was here, and I'm going to stick a needle in my eye.
How do you deal with the misinformation out there? A kid says, well, I'm getting this much money from the school, when you find out, well, that's not true. How do you negotiate that?
Yeah, I mean, you guys could help. I think you guys are, you got a harder job than I do, right? Because who knows what, you guys probably get misinformation from coaches and everybody. You know, everybody's lying, right? You got to sort it out. I mean, I think that's, you got to figure out, is that really true? I think you have to have a structure like you do, and then you have to adhere to it. This is what you're going to, QB1 is going to be slotted to make this much money, and left tackle 2 is going to be slotted to make this much money. And there's going to be variations in that, but you got to be disciplined enough to, keep to your cap.
You mentioned you've been needing to see an extra level of intensity in this team. We're in the spring. These players, some of them knew you, but a lot of them didn't. Is it possible that they are going to see another level of intensity from you and another level of intensity from Hard Edge, and they're not fully aware of what it'll be like until we get to the fall, or are they?
No, hell, I'm not
used to it?
practicing differently.
Okay, so you're
I'm
not gonna turn
practicing
up another
differently
level.
yesterday or tomorrow or next year or last year or 10 years from now or 20 years ago.
So what's going on now that will be a good idea for them of what it'll be like?
Yeah, I don't, and I don't go out there like we're certain, like, geez, they need to see this kind of, I just go out and coach. And, you know what I'm saying? It's like, I'm not like thinking, I need to be a hard ass today, or I need to be a buddy today. I just go and coach. And all my coaches, some of them are louder, some of them are quieter, some of them, I like to yell not as much. I don't like always being the bad guy, but I'm just coaching. You know what I mean? I don't even think about it.
Any of the older guys or the guys you'd inherited that have taken to your system better than you thought, that have come along, that
What's
jumped out
that?
at you? Some of the older guys that you've inherited, have they taken? Is there any that have jumped out to you that have?
No, everybody's kind of, they've all been pleased. Yeah, that's what I said. I think there was maybe a misconception that I was unhappy with the roster. That's not really, I'm unhappy with our competition and depth at several spots, and so we're going to try to quick that. But the guys that have been here have worked hard and given good effort. It's not easy on them when somebody comes in, but I'm not intensely trying to be like, you know, all Mr. Mean guy and have them all quit. You know what I mean? So, and that's why I think it's tough with you. I hope, respectfully ask that you don't try to ask our players about comparative, you know, styles, you know, from this staff to that staff, or this coach to this coach, or this school to that school, or this player to you, or, you know, how's this guy adjusting to the new staff compared to the old staff? Because I think that's kind of unfair to the guys a little bit, because they have to adapt to change, and that's not always easy. But every coach is different. I mean, they had good coaches here. Neil Brown's a good football coach. You know, and sometimes, you know, things didn't come together, or you get a little unlucky, or it just didn't click at the time he wanted to click and all that. But, you know, Neil didn't get to this level as a head coach not being a good football coach. He's a good football coach. And there's a lot of factors that go into, you know, if you be able to win. I've been fortunate to have some success, and I've had really, really good players that played really, really hard, and I had a great staff around. So that formula kind of worked for us. But I've followed some really good coaches too, including Neil Brown.
Is there a position coach that stood out to you so far that you've hired that's impressed you?
See, now, like, that's a fair question, but then that's like asking me what player. Then I'm leaving off 20 players. You know, if I'm leaving off how many staff members I got now, 50 staff members. You know what I mean? You know, so I would answer your question because I think I understand the thing, but it's like asking me which one of your kids do you love the most, Red or Raquel? I love them as much as you can love your kids. You know what I mean? That's the way it is. And it's the same way with my staff. I love my entire staff. I think I've been very blessed to have great staffs everywhere I've been. And this has the makings to be as good of a staff as I've ever had. I'll say it that way.
Speaking of that, in terms of staffs, obviously the size has just grown enormously. So what can you do with that much more? Are there negatives as well with trying to manage that many people?
Sure is. You want to make sure everybody has a role, and I think guys that are on staff, no matter what role they're in, they could be in strength or training or nutrition or recruiting or on field, whatever it is, you know, they all want to have a role and feel like they played a part in the success of the program. So it's my job and a couple other guys on the staff's job is make sure those roles are defined. I've done that to some degree right now, but the reality is I do a little get together like a staff, not really a retreat because we probably won't retreat anywhere. We'll do it here. But we'll spend 3 days discussing every day for the next 365 days of our program and every single staff member's role and what their expectations are and all that kind of stuff. So I have a book that's about that thick. And it evolves over the years, but a lot of it has stayed the same. So coming up it's usually in May that everybody in the staff will be involved in that. And it's long. I don't like long meetings, but this will take 3.5 days to explain that organizational chart, what everybody does, what the expectations are, what their role is, and then go from there.
Football's evolved over the years. Offensive football, I'm thinking mostly, but defense too. Changing from wing tee to triple options. You picked an offense. How has it evolved over the years? And I mean, when you look at film now from 2003, do you say, boy, that's primitive, or of yourself?
No, I think we're doing a lot more, and I think everybody's doing more, and I think technology has helped because you can, watch, like I can go right now and where our film will already be in the thing, and I can watch it, click it up, and from 3 different angles, and so it's a lot easier to learn more. People are doing more, I think, because it's easier to learn more, quicker with the technology. But I think sometimes almost too much so. When you look back and say, boy, those guys are really good fundamentally. I think sometimes we do too much on offense and defense. I'm talking about us in general, college and NFL. And and you don't work as good as the fundamentals because you get all these new play ideas and everybody else is doing them. So my job is to obviously to keep exploring what's out there, what can help us scheme wise, but let's not forget the fundamental part of it, of how to block, how to tackle, how do you do your footwork, all that kind of stuff. And that's, to me, where when we've had success, we've been mostly simpler, but we've been really good fundamentally with really good players, and we can't lose that.
Why does this offense that you've run for so long, why does it fit you? Why is that you?
I think probably because it's the first part, the tempo, just because of the lack of patience. I have no patience. Like, I have more patience with you all sitting here for 30 minutes answering questions than anything else I do in my entire life, just so you know. But that part of it, and I guess I kind of grew up and playing it for Roy Michael, North Marion High School, where it was just, hard. I used to throw the ball all the time at Glenville, right? And that was the way we were going to get after people. But it's been mostly a tougher. We're going to run the ball until you make us throw the ball, and we're going to come at you at a faster pace and trying to make conditioning. We're going to try to be the tougher team mentally, all that kind of stuff. Every coach says they're going to do, but do you live that? Do you do that every day in your program? Is that a part of your deal? And I've always been able to have that as part of our deal on all three phases, and so that's kind of we hang our hat on. And that's why it fits West Virginia. I think this is a tough blue collar, people that live in this state. They're not afraid to get their hands dirty. I grew up the son of a coal miner, coming home and coal, dirt and dust all over him. Then they go out in the garden or go hunting because they were spend the last 8 hours down in a hole. So it's kind of that kind of mentality is what I grew up in north central West Virginia. And I think that kind of maybe has a role in how I like to, like I always tell you, we've run for 400, 500 yards before a few times. We've thrown for a couple of times way back when Jed's days for 500. If you ask me which one you'd rather have, both of them's pretty good. But if you run for 500 on somebody, it's programmed demoralizing. It's like, oh my, that's the worst thing ever, right? If somebody runs for 300, 400, 500 yards on you, as a coach, you're like, oh my gosh, we just got steamrolled.
Coach, on the point North Marion, that happened in the middle of a consolidation, you playing there. Are there any similarities between kids that may have played in Monongah or Barrackville not having a roster spot in North Marion to what you're
that's the first time I thought about that when you said that, but I can remember it like it was yesterday because it was all of those 5 small schools, 5 communities. I was in Granttown. We didn't have high school in Granttown. We went to Fairview, so I played at Fairview High School, and you had Monongah and Mannington and Barrackville and who else? Farmington, all those schools together. And I remember there was a lot of folks that were like, geez, this is going to take away the small town high schools and take away opportunities. And I'm like, this is the greatest thing ever. We're going to be able to play at the highest level. And I think there was 150 guys. I might be wrong. I think it was around 140, 150 guys that went out for football that first year at North Marion. Because I remember because we had a big circle of we were doing that, some little drills, and guys are falling out left and right. And a lot of the 150, probably 100 of them were starters at other schools. But I thought it was great. The competition was great. I said, this is going to be the best thing ever. And we wound up winning the second year. We wound up winning a state championship. And Roy Michael was a hard-nosed, tough, really good football coach. But I remember there were guys that quit like left and right because they weren't used to that whole challenge. And I thought that was a really good lesson to me. That's where I love football playing at Fairview for John Foltz. I love that. But the North Marion thing was the competition with all these people coming in. That's why I have a hard time with guys that bail on competition. I want guys that embrace it, not run away from it.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay.